Excellent, thank you. Yes, this afternoon what I'd like to do is just give you a bit of an insight into where we're going with our data program. Sustainability Victoria has responsibility for looking after statewide data, for statewide waste and resource recovery data, and over the last probably 2 years we've been on a program to centralise all of that data into a central warehouse and then to visualise that and make it public. So a lot of the data that I'll talk about is actually on our website, but given the interest of time, I'm not actually going to jump through to our website. Just a bit of background where data's going, because I think where data is going now is actually informing a lot of what we're doing with our data. Data previously used to be all about reporting on what's happened in the past. And I'll speak this way, sorry. So data has always been about reporting where you go, where you've been. It's more about looking backwards than forwards. With the new data technology, I think it's now much more about the stories going forward. So as we look at the data, what we really want to do is use predictive analytics to say what are the possible futures, and that's a bit more science fiction, whereas previously before it's been a bit more like a historical novel. So we're shifting, and data is driving this shift, and it drives a shift in thinking too, and it drives a shift in how you use data. So we're on this journey here. We're shifting from looking backwards to going forwards. We've still got a fair way to go, I think. The other thing, you need both. You can't just use one, you actually do need both, so we're doing both. The other thing that we've been doing is saying, well, how do we actually get our data to tell a different story to what it's been done in the past? And we found this model of the circular economy is actually a really useful way of integrating the data, and it's a really useful way then of also looking at what are the issues that you've got within material flows and what are the potential solutions, and what happens if you put an intervention at a certain point in the circular economy. It always highlights the point that that's going to have flow-on effects actually back up the chain and further down the chain. So when you start mapping the data to these sorts of models, it'll point out all of the holes in your data, and we've got quite a few of those, but it'll also point out where you should be collecting next, and then what should you be doing with the data that you collect on each of these different stages of the circular economy. A quick thing about our data collection, we've been running annual surveys for both local government and the recycling recovery industry for about 15 years. We have pretty solid trend data on curbside collections, residual recycling and organics, and also on materials that are being reprocessed. We also have landfill data that comes from our EPA, and so we get a picture of the total waste coming through there. So those two main surveys, they are annual surveys, which is a bit of a hole. We'd like to get data a lot quicker than that, but they do give us 15 years of solid, reliable data, which you can look back on, but we've now used to project forward on. And what we've done, I won't click through to the website, but it's all on our website. We have now some interactive dashboards, they're all public, where you can look at that 15 years of trend data across all of our local government areas. You can aggregate local government areas and then look at the projections of what the waste stream might be going up to the next 10 years. And we can also do it by material type, and you can aggregate that and look at it from a regional perspective across the major waste recovery regions in Victoria. We sit this on our investment webpage because it's really important for people who are looking to invest, who want to put in infrastructure, to know where that feedstock is for any potential investments. And it's also useful for councils to say, if we aggregate these 4 councils here, what are the volumes that we've got in our residual, what are the volumes that we've got in our recycling, what volumes have we got in organics. And we've also recently put on a dashboard for biomass as well, which is trying to get that sort of biomass which is not within the official collection systems. So have a look on our website. I won't go through them there now. Once I get onto the website, it's interactive. You can spend half an hour quite easily just looking through all of those. Is it working? I'm not quite sure what's happening here. I don't know what's going on. It's gone through to the website. Oh, sorry, how do I get out of there? Yeah, you can close that down probably. There it is. Sorry about that. Here we go, that should work. There we go, that'll do. Thanks. Leave that one there. No, back. All right, we've mapped the data, as I said, to the circular economy. One of the things that's apparent almost immediately when we did this was we've got very good data on the collection. We've got pretty good data on the generation. We've got good data in the sorting. We've got good data on landfill because that's a financial system that collects that. But as we go further around the circle, our data becomes less and less reliable. And we actually don't have anything in the design and production stages and usage stages. So it's pointed out some really significant holes. But we start off basically with 12.6 million tonnes of waste being generated. We'd actually like to add in material flows so that we'd know how much material is actually remaining in the economy, not just that which is coming through to the waste, and we're working on how to do that. And we also know that there's some leakage from the system. We know that through illegal dumping and litter and other avenues that we lose some of that material out, and we're estimating that at about 60,000 tonnes a year. But as you go around, you can see how much it's separated. We've got data on how much is collected by sector, C&D, C&I, MSW. We know how much is going into landfill. Sorting, we can split into all the different material types. A critical one for us, which made us thinking of these models in probably August, September last year with the China ban coming up, was to have a look at exports. And we've also got good recovery data. As soon as you go past the recovery, we have no data at all. So there's a big hole for us to keep working on. I'm going backwards. Why is that going backwards? I'll use this.
I'll drive it.
You'll drive it, thank you. I'm not quite sure why that's going backwards.
Are we up to the next one?
Yeah, keep going. Thanks. Dodgy data, yeah. Okay, one of the things we had to do was to start looking at what are our export markets. I can drive that now. So we had to look, obviously paper and plastic were the big two that we've started having a look at. Oh, geez. Here we go. So we started looking at the individual paper and cardboard. So we've got 2 million tonnes generated in waste. We recover about 1.5 million tonnes of that. And if you follow it all the way around, we've got about somewhere between 100 and what's the export? 720,000 tonnes of paper is actually exported. We shouldn't have been surprised when the China ban hit that this was going to be a problem, because China is a major export market for all of that. And I suppose in hindsight, we should have been watching this. We weren't. You can do the same thing with plastics. Plastics has got not as many tonnes, but actually has quite a bit more plastic sitting in landfill. So we've still got 74% of our plastics going through to landfill. That represents a big opportunity for anyone wanting to invest in that area. The other thing that we noted is once you split it by plastic type, because plastics is not homogeneous, it throws up other interesting areas. And what we really need to do with plastics is probably map value rather than tonnes. And especially when you get to something like polystyrene, there's 6,500 tonnes of polystyrene. But if you put that into a volume, it's something like huge amounts of polystyrene. So you need better measures than just straight tonnes. And we're looking at now whether we go to volume for some of these plastics. And as I said, what we really want to do is try and map value around the chain rather than just straight tonnes. And when you get to something like e-waste, where your value is more in precious metals, you really want to be mapping in grams if you can in some of those areas. So we need to look at how we can get that data flow coming better through much better granular levels. One of the things that I mentioned before is we were watching what happens to our exports, and this is exports of plastic waste. But we always had this one line coming here. What was the plastic that was being recovered? And we chart plastic being recovered. And what we really should have been doing was watching what happened between the relationship between the export markets and the local reprocessing. And as you can see, in somewhere around 2007-8, big aggressive push by China to actually bring plastics in, and it altered the market dynamics. And I suppose from a macroeconomic point of view, this should have set alarm bells back in 2007 and 8. Who's watching this sort of stuff? And if we don't watch this sort of stuff, we'll get into the problems we've got now. You can see the slight dip in 2012 on the black line. That was the first China's ban, the one that I think they called a green fence. It fizzed. They didn't go through with it properly. There was a dip though, and then it came back up. And now I wonder what's going to happen now with this one. If this graph doesn't shift and we keep the exports highlight that and we keep that structure within the market, we're going to be exposed again the next time, say, Thailand or Indonesia or someone else says, no, we no longer want your plastics. So that's why this is pointing towards the development and bringing back, I suppose, the Victorian plastics reprocessing industry to actually feed through into manufacturing. So this points to those sort of interventions that we're hearing about now about promoting local industry. And this graph here is one that will be interesting to watch over the next few years about what is happening within that market. The other thing then that we started looking at, what influences the plastics market? Because if you're going to tie an essential service like waste collection to a commodity market, you better be watching the commodity market as well. So we've had a go at looking at what are the correlations between plastics being recovered and things like the Australian dollar, Australian US dollar fluctuations, oil price fluctuations, Chinese yuan fluctuations. And anything there which is sort of in the green shows a positive correlation. The higher the number, the stronger the correlation. And there are some correlations between Australian dollar going up, but exports going up. And if you're into investment, you know that that's sort of back to front. If the Australian dollar goes up, your exports should actually come down because it's more expensive for other people to buy it. So what we've been doing is digging deeper into that and saying, well, what's going on? We've figured that if the Australian dollar goes up in value, it means that the manufacturers can bring in virgin plastics at a cheaper price. And if that's coupled with a dive in the oil price, you get a situation where virgin plastic is heaps cheaper than recycled plastic, and your market comes off, and your domestic market for recovered plastics goes down. So we need to watch these sorts of things from a policy perspective, and we need to watch these things from an investment perspective, because if we're expecting our domestic manufacturers to use our recycled plastic, if there are low oil prices and high Australian dollar, it's going to be far cheaper for them to keep using virgin plastics. So there may be some interventions needed there. But it shows that you really need to watch the markets and you really need to watch the economics of it, and you can do that through a data perspective. We also have been having a look at other correlations too. There's no one really strong correlation in the plastics market. It's a combination of a whole variety of different things, and we're trying to now think through, well, what sort of data technology can we use to sort out the patterns about how that goes through. So the correlations aren't really that strong. I'll come through. One of the things I mentioned before, which has become immediately sort of obvious over the last, well, not immediately obvious, come obvious over the last 6 months, is the drivers on the left-hand side of that graph, or that visualisation, the generation, separation and collection, it's really being driven by the essential service type nature of getting rid of the waste. And the economics of it should be driven by the essential service type thing of getting rid of your waste. In Victoria, we've had a situation probably set up 15, 20 years ago when it started, where the economics of it was driven more by the commodity pricing. And that's really, it exposes you when you have a commodity price crash. So we need to set up a situation where we have the economics of that side set up by the essential service of waste, and the other side is actually set up by the commodity pricing. So it's a market-driven approach. And there's that bit of a discrepancy between the two, which I think from a policy perspective we have to actually look at. How are we going to address this issue of having an essential service tied up to a commodity price model? We need to understand those markets better. What are the interventions that we need? The landfill levy itself is actually pushing things around from going into landfill further around the cycle. But if the landfill levy is not enough and it doesn't counteract the crash in markets, it could actually flow back and you end up with it back in landfill. So those sorts of things, I think, is one of the reasons why we're now looking at data from this perspective, not just looking at saying, yes, we've got a wonderful recovery rate of 67% across the state, which is really good, but you actually have to look at the whole system and take a systems-based approach to it to actually make the economics of the whole system work and not just part of the system. So that's where we are at the moment. One of the things we've been looking at is what are the other useful things we need to do with our data. We really need to work out a whole circular economy. We need to work out what are the total inputs and what are the total outputs. And we also look at, and really on those manufacturing and usage figures, which we'll try and get over the next year or so. Tonnes is not enough, it's too blunt. When you get down to more granular levels of material type, we need to start looking at what is the best measure for that. And it may be kilograms, it may be volumes, but I think it'll probably be a good thing to do is to track, as I said before, things like value. The other thing that we're looking at doing from a climate change point of view is mapping the carbon cost around the cycle as well. So we should be able to get that, and that might give some other indicators about the values in terms of carbon abatement. We need to merge that market data with the material data to get that total picture. We want to know how material moves, but we also want to know how value moves. The other thing that is really interesting from a technological point of view, and we're working with some RMIT Masters of Analytics students on this, is how do you use new data technology to get better insights? So we're running things through like programs, decision trees and machine learning to see if we can pick up other patterns within the data. And one of the first things that we've noticed is we've got probably 20 to 30,000 different data points. To get a really good machine learning, you probably need closer to 1 million. So we've still got a long way to go before we can start using that. So one of the real key challenges for us is to get data through quicker and to build up a better data set so that we can actually start matching it and looking for patterns. But we have used decision tree learning for our looking at correlations within organics. And organics, we started there because it's obviously related to weather patterns, and we can, I think there's something like 230 different data sets across Victoria which we can now match our organics waste collection data to, and that shows the correlations of about 90%, so really strong correlations there. So we're working through that more as an idea to get a model working that we can then run other data sets through to do that. So we're teaching ourselves a lot about this new technology. A lot of people in the data field, especially in Victoria, have been there 20 years, and data technology has moved in the last 6 months, let alone the last 20 years. So it's a real challenge to keep up with that. But there's some really exciting stuff coming through with data technology, both in the visualisation side, if you want to have a look at our website. It's on Sustainability Victoria, it's the waste data portal, but also in the analytical technology is really exciting about where we could go with some of this stuff when we start mapping value and start getting more granular data. So it's a bit of a macroeconomic maybe point of view. I'm not quite sure why I was in the economic stream. I will leave it there because we're trying to get a little bit more time, but I'm more than happy to take questions, and as I said, definitely have a look at the website and you'll see where we're going with that. Thank you.